think you know fear? Tonight, we're challenging you to brave the Museum of Lost Voices, a place where the past isn't just remembered, it's relived. Every forgotten sound, every chilling echo holds a horrifying secret that will haunt your nightmares. Are you brave enough to listen? The heavy doors of the Museum of Lost Voices creaked open, their ancient hinges protesting against the intrusion of a world that had long forgotten them. A dim light flickered in the hallway, casting long shadows on the walls, where faded portraits and dusty exhibits stood frozen in time. To most, this museum was an enigma, half forgotten by the city, half abandoned by its creators. But tonight, a new visitor was about to enter. They had come seeking knowledge, but little did they know they would find something much darker. The sound of footsteps echoed through the marble floors, the air thick with the scent of must and decay. The visitor paused, hesitant at the threshold, but before they could second-guess their decision, a figure emerged from the gloom. The curator. Tall and gaunt, the curator's features were sharp, his face pale like the bones of the museum itself. His eyes, hollow and deep-set, gave the impression of someone who had long since lost any hope of peace. His clothing, an old, tattered suit that might have been fashionable a century ago, seemed to absorb the dim light. He extended a bony hand to the visitor, his fingers trembling as they made contact. "Welcome to the Museum of Lost Voices." The curator's voice was a low whisper, almost lost in the silence. "I see you've come to hear the stories of the forgotten, but beware, once you hear, you may never be the same." As they walked deeper into the museum, the curator's voice grew more solemn, as if the walls themselves were listening. "This place," the curator began, his voice laden with years of secrets, "it's not just a museum, it's a living nightmare." He paused, glancing over his shoulder, as if making sure no one else was within earshot. Not just any voices, but lost voices. Echoes of people whose stories were never told. Forgotten whispers, cries, and even the last screams of those who perished in terror. They didn't just fade away. Oh no, they linger here, trapped within these walls, desperate to be heard. But that's where the danger lies. The curator stopped in front of a dusty, darkened glass case, inside of which lay an antique phonograph. The polished brass of the machine gleamed in the weak light. The needle on the turntable was still, as if waiting. "This," the curator said, "is the last recording ever made by a woman named Eleanor Wilde. She was a historian, much like yourself, but her curiosity led her to uncover something no one was meant to hear. You see, Eleanor was obsessed with the idea of resonance, the notion that certain voices, when amplified by the right conditions, could transcend time. She was determined to capture the voice of a woman who had died in the most horrifying circumstances." The curator's voice dropped to a mere whisper. She succeeded, but the voice she captured was not human. The visitor felt a chill creeping along their spine. They stared at the phonograph, unable to look away from the machine that seemed so innocuous, yet so foreboding. The curator moved to a small alcove where a series of old leather-bound journals were kept. He opened one, revealing faded handwriting that was nearly illegible. Eleanor's obsession grew, the curator continued, his fingers tightening around the journal. She began to hear things. At night, she would sit by her phonograph, listening to the same recordings over and over. And then one day, she came to me. The curator's eyes narrowed as if recalling the moment with great clarity. She was frantic, her eyes wild with fear. She told me that the voice she had captured was alive. It was no longer just a sound trapped in a machine. It was speaking to her, urging her to release it. At first, she thought it was just her mind playing tricks. But soon the voice grew more insistent. The curator turned to face the visitor fully, his gaze intense. It knew her, and it wanted something. The air of the museum seemed to grow heavier, the silence more suffocating as the curator recounted the chilling tale. His voice, though soft, reverberated throughout the empty halls. I tried to warn her, he said, his fingers tightening around the journal. But she was consumed by the need to understand. She thought she could control it. But there's one thing you must understand about the voices in this museum. They don't just want to be heard. They want to escape. They want to be freed. The curator's eyes flickered towards a darkened corner of the room. Someone was watching. I warned her to stop, to leave the voice alone, he murmured, but she didn't listen. And then, one night, she vanished, disappeared without a trace. No one ever found her, but her voice still lingers here. If you listen closely, you can hear her. You'll hear her pleading for help. The curator's voice shook as if caught between terror and some deeper, darker understanding. As they ventured deeper into the museum, the atmosphere became increasingly unsettling. The voices, the echoes, seemed to grow louder, though the curator insisted they were merely recordings. But the visitors' skin prickled as they passed each exhibit, each one filled with strange instruments, old audio equipment, and dusty record players. This museum, the curator said softly, almost to himself, was built on an ancient concept, one that goes back centuries. The belief that certain sounds could not just capture the past, but recreate it. These voices, they're more than just sounds. They're conscious, they're alive in their own way. Each voice is a reflection of something long gone, but they still remember, and they want to be heard, even if it's the last thing they do. The curator paused before a particular glass case where a large, cracked mirror stood. The surface of the glass seemed to shimmer unnaturally, as if something was moving within. He motioned for the visitor to come closer. "Do you see?" the curator asked, his voice a whisper of breath. "That," the curator said, "is Eleanor." Her voice
didn't die with her. It's trapped in the glass, forever repeating her final moments. And now it wants to tell you her story. The visitor stepped back in horror, but the curator only smiled. A strange, knowing smile. "It's too late now," he whispered. "You've heard it. The voices are calling. And once you've heard them, you're never truly alone again." The walls seemed to close in, the whispers growing louder and more frantic. The voice of Eleanor, now joined by others, all reaching out from the shadows, demanding attention, pleading for release. The visitor turned to leave, but the door they had entered through
slammed shut. The sound of footsteps, faint but unmistakable, echoed through the corridors. The curator's figure, now mere inches away, leaned in. "You think you know fear?" he whispered. "Now you're part of the museum. Welcome to the Museum of Lost Voices." Years later, a new visitor would step into the Museum of Lost Voices, and in the dim light, as they passed the darkened glass cases and listening devices, they would hear a whisper, "Help me." It would be the voice of Eleanor Wilde, and the voice of someone else.